Hi, everyone. Good evening.
Hi,
Thanks.
everyone. Good evening. Thanks.
Sorry, everyone. We have a little
Sorry,
bit of
everyone. We have a
technical.
little bit of technical.
Maybe Teresa could you put the mute? Maybe that would help. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think that did help. So yes, hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us on this online conversation about taxes for migrant workers. We get lots and lots of questions about taxes. So we wanted to have this presentation as an opportunity to share information for people to be able to ask questions about taxes. So we're really happy to be joined by two guest speakers tonight. But first, I should introduce myself. My name is Stacy. Stacy Gomez. I am with No One is Illegal Halifax Chibuktuk's Migrant Workers Program. And we also have Shernette, who's our Logistics and Service Access Coordinator, who is also joining us and helping us with this event tonight. And I also will introduce our two speakers. So we have Shuri Baduri, who's a staff lawyer at the Northumberland Community Legal Center. And we have Teresa Williams, who's a paralegal at Schmidt Law Legal Services. And so during the course of this online event, we're going to be talking about the process for filing taxes, benefits migrant workers may be entitled to, as well as other questions about taxes. The focus will be around migrant farm workers, but I know that there are other workers, including in the seafood sector, who may also join. So just to mention that, the event is going to take place in English, and we're seeing what to do, possibly an event in Spanish or translating this presentation. El evento de esta noche va a ser en inglés. Se trata de los impuestos por los trabajadores migrantes y estamos viendo qué hacer en el futuro, si hacer otro taller en español, o solo traducir este evento, no sabemos por el momento, pero de todos modos, si usted habla español y tiene una pregunta, nos puede enviar su pregunta por WhatsApp. El número en donde vamos a estar recibiendo preguntas es el 902-329-9595 en WhatsApp. So we'll be collecting questions throughout the presentation via WhatsApp. So you can send us your questions at 902-329-9595. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this presentation a lot, and we'll be back with your questions. And so for now, I will turn it over to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm sorry if you do have a hard time hearing me and it's echoey. I seem to be having some technical difficulties. My name is Teresa Williams, as Stacy said, and I used to work with Shari at the Northumberland Community Legal Center, and I have quite a background working with temporary foreign workers, mostly in my cases for this seasonal ag worker program. Tonight, it's about taxes and the tax benefits, but it also included information about some programs that are based on when and how you file and if you file your taxes. Stacy did send us a list of questions, so we do hope to, we should be able to answer them. If we can't, then we'll see what we can do about finding the answers. Shari, do you mind sharing?
Sure. Can everyone see my slides here? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, but it's not in slideshow view.
Oh. Is that better?
Let's take a sec. No.
No? Okay.
Share it.
It sounds okay. Okay, Stacy says it's okay. I don't know. Teresa, you might have to share then. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
If it's not showing up.
Okay. And at the end of the slide, we're going to provide you with some resources about where you might be able to find help. So I like to include this slide for every presentation I do about temporary foreign workers. I like, in case there are service providers that are attending, or, you know, just to sort of reaffirm for workers that they are members of our community. So temporary foreign workers come into Canada through the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, the high wage and the low wage streams, the Seasonal Ag Worker Program, or the Caregiver Program. And everything is tied with immigration status, and immigration status is different for all of these. And so when we're talking about filing taxes, your deductions, other programs that are linked with your tax filings in Canada, we want to keep in mind that it's different for each stream. So where we can break it down, we will. So these will be how we're going to do our topics of discussion, because even though it's just that it's a tax presentation, some of the questions, some of these topics are really relevant. So all temporary foreign workers are required to file an annual tax. So I know one of the questions was about residency. So because you're working in Canada, whether you can, no matter what stream you come through, you are required to file an income tax return. Once you've filed, your tax benefits are calculated based on your tax return. And those benefits may be things like, I'm going to list them for Canadians so that you have an idea, but it's child tax benefit, HST, but there are also provincial tax rebates. So in Ontario, where we are, there's a rebate for hydro or electricity. That's also based on your federal income tax return. So again, taxes are collected federally and provincially and municipally. So in your local town, that shouldn't affect you unless you own property there. It shouldn't have an effect on you. The Canada Revenue Agency has set up a volunteer income tax program. At the end of this presentation, there's a slide about resources, about where you can get this done. So you do not have to use the liaison. You're not required to use the liaison. It's been my experience that sometimes the liaisons will indicate that you're required to use their services, but this isn't the case. So if you're paying for the liaison to do it, you may want to think about switching to the volunteer tax program. And there are so many out there. I looked up Truro because it's the middle to me. It's sort of the middle of Nova Scotia to me, which is probably not correct. But it is the town that I pulled up. And there were 5 different locations in Truro alone where you can access this community income tax volunteer program, which is a free service. Okay. So there are tax deductions. So there's a straight up tax, income tax. So you get paid income, you're taxed on that income. This is based, well, generally speaking, they're all based on what you earn. So there's the income tax, Canada Pension Plan, employment insurance. In some cases, so depending on how much your income is, you may pay a provincial health premium. It's unlikely that you're paying that, but every paycheck you get should have what each deduction is, what the actual income tax deduction is, what the Canada Pension Plan deduction is, and everything. In many cases, where housing is provided, landlords deduct a housing amount. Sometimes on your checks, you will see the flight amount. These things are regulated. Only a specific amount per week can come off. If you have actual questions about your specific paycheck, if you think my paycheck, so I'm single, I live on the farm, I make the same rate of pay, work exactly the same hours, but my check differs from the person beside me who essentially mirrors what I do, then you may want to speak to the income tax preparer. So the liaison, the volunteer program. And again, in Canada, then, for residents, you get the Canadian Child Benefit, the HST rebate, and then a provincial tax rebate. So it is unlikely, well, it's impossible for the seasonal ag workers to get the child benefit. Some of the low-wage workers and the living caregivers will qualify for this, but their immigration status is different. So one of the benefits is Canada Pension Plan, and I will turn it to Shari to talk to you about this.
Perfect. Thanks, Teresa. So, yes, one of the important benefits that temporary foreign workers are entitled to is the Canadian Pension Plan benefit. Specifically, there are a couple of options for you. So the first one is the Canadian Pension Plan Disability Benefit. And very often it's a difficult one to basically get onto, but if, let's say, a worker is working on a farm and there's, a change in terms of your injury, you got hurt really badly, you may qualify for the Canadian Pension Plan Disability Benefit. The legal test in this case is quite difficult. It's a test where you have to meet the condition of a severe and prolonged injury. And basically, the legislation explicitly states that you wouldn't be able to do any type of gainful employment. So it is a very difficult test to meet, but it is there for temporary foreign workers if they meet the criteria. Now, the most popular one that I typically deal with is the Canadian Pension Plan Early Retirement Benefits. And as Teresa said, you are going to see this benefit, paying into this benefit on every pay stub. So this is something that, sorry, we're getting a little bit of background noise here. I don't know.
Oh, sorry, I'll mute.
So sorry about that. So as I said, the Canadian Pension Plan benefit is a very popular benefit that temporary foreign workers are entitled to. And basically, this is a benefit that you'll see, like Teresa said, on your pay stubs, and you'll be contributing to this. Now, you can qualify to get this benefit as early as the age of 60. And what I do is I encourage migrant workers to basically apply for this benefit before they meet the age of 60. So it's an application form that you would fill out. It's available on the Service Canada website. And basically, in addition to that, you're going to want to complete what we call a foreign direct deposit form. And I'll talk a little bit about this a bit later, but what that means is for many of you, you'll be able to get your retirement benefits in your home country. There are certain countries where it won't apply and you can't use the foreign direct deposit form. And for example, one of those countries is St. Lucia. But basically, you are eligible to get this CPP benefit, and that'll start as early as age 60 or 65, depending on when you wanted to take that benefit. The other popular one that you are entitled to is the Canadian Pension Plan Survivor Benefit. And that basically is also available to everyone. So let's say, you have families that are, back home. Unfortunately, if a worker passes away, that survivor, that worker's spouse may be entitled to this benefit, and they would be able to get this in their home country as well. So this is another benefit that does apply. But the main one that we get in terms of helping a lot of workers with here, especially in Ontario, is the Canadian Pension Plan benefit. And again, that temporary foreign direct deposit form is something that I will talk about, but it's very important to complete that so you can get your benefits back in your home country. So the next benefit that we'll talk about is employment insurance. And there's different types of benefits. Again, this is something that you pay into on your pay stub. And as Teresa mentioned, you'll see it there, like how much whether your paychecks are bi-weekly, monthly, you'll be able to see your contributions towards this type of benefit. Basically, the big thing to remember is, like any other type of benefit, it's really tied to your immigration status. And seasonal agricultural worker program, workers that come from that program are rarely entitled to EI benefits. There's a lot of challenges associated with that, and I'll explain a little bit why in a bit. But specifically, low-wage workers may be entitled to EI benefits as well as caregivers. Those are basically the two main types of workers that will be entitled to employment insurance. For seasonal agriculture workers, they are rarely entitled to it, and it's because of their immigration status. So typically, like I said, there's a bunch of different benefits that you pay into, and one of them is the regular benefits, and those are for basically individuals that lost their jobs due to no fault of their own. So very often that's because of shortage of work. You've been let go from your employer, and you can no longer work, but you have to be able to be looking for work, and that's the big criteria for a regular benefit. There's also maternity benefits. Again, it's always tied to your status, so important to remember. If you're a seasonal agricultural worker, you may not be eligible for this benefit, but there is that benefit available to low-waged workers. And that would give you parental benefits basically for about 40 weeks, and depending on the type of leave that you're taking. The big one that I help a lot of workers apply for in the area that I work in is sickness benefits. So let's say that you're unable to work because you're unwell and you're not sure of the duration of it, but right now you've had to stop working and you have no income. So you're not being paid by your farm, you're by your employer. You would be eligible if you've contributed into employment insurance for the sickness benefits, and that goes up to 15 weeks. Now, again, it is tied to your status, so it's really important to remember that if you're not in Canada at the time, you may not be eligible for it. Compassionate care benefits is another big benefit that you may be eligible for, and that if you're paying into employment insurance, as well as family caregiver benefits for children and family care benefits for adults as well. So those are part of the employment insurance program that you pay into, whether you're a temporary foreign worker or you are a low-wage worker. So it's really important to check if you're feeling that, let's say you're unwell for a period of time and you have no income, you really want to review these types of benefits that may be income to you at the end of the day.
Do you mind if I just butt in for a second here and say, this is an issue that people working with temporary foreign workers have been trying incredibly hard to have changed. So SOP workers are almost never entitled to employment insurance benefits unless it's the sick benefit. And that is typically for a hernia or a sprain, something where you will only be out of work for a couple of weeks. Otherwise, if you're sent to your home country, you cannot collect the benefits.
And Teresa,
sorry.
No problem. And Teresa, to add to that, we just got a question in the chat. An individual has asked, why do I pay into EI and the agent has denied my employment insurance claim? So very often the reason could be, it depends what type of, immigration status you have. It's important to seek legal advice in terms of, why to look at your options, but it is common for individuals to get denied, especially if they don't meet the immigration status. And I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Teresa, in terms of what you've seen.
Just that there were special provisions for workers from Trinidad who were stuck in Canada and couldn't get home, and their work had been completed. And so they were able to get employment insurance benefits, regular employment insurance benefits, but specific policies were created. So if you're not a Trinidad worker and you were applying for regular, not a Trinidad worker back in December and January up to and including possibly June when they work began again, or when your work began again, that's likely why you were denied. I'm done.
Okay.
Oh, you're waiting the slide.
Okay, so again, there's 3 types of caregiving EI benefits. I won't talk a lot about this because I know a lot of you are seasonal agricultural, part of the seasonal agricultural workers program. But if you are, let's say, caregiving, or you're a low-waged employee, you may be eligible for these types of benefits. So the family caregiver benefit for children, which is 35 weeks, the family caregiver benefit for adults, which is 15 weeks, and the compassionate care benefit. So always good to, call a local community legal clinic or get some advice, because you may be very well entitled to certain benefits, and there may be a better benefit out there for you to give you enough income replacement. So it's important to always double check in terms of which benefit might be the best benefit to avoid any overpayments with employment insurance, because that's something we'll talk a little bit about, but it is very possible. I've seen it firsthand where many of the workers that I advise, may have applied for a benefit that they're not entitled to, and they may get that money, but later on that may mean that you have to pay back that money as well if it's not the right benefit. So in terms of how to get onto employment insurance and how to qualify for the benefits, you must have accumulated enough hours of insurable employment. So for that period, they'll look at, it can't be jobs that you've done years and years before. It has to be your last previous job worked. And they'll look at how many hours you've contributed towards that. Have a reason for not working. So let's say you're not well, like Teresa outlined, for a short period of time, you may qualify for EI sick benefits. For regular benefits, again, the key is that you must be capable and available for work and looking for work. That's a big one. So for low-waged workers that are eligible, let's say they lost their job, no fault of their own, they must be capable and available to work and are looking for work. Now, each benefit has a maximum benefit period. Like for EI sick, we spoke about 15 weeks. For regular benefits, the length will depend on, how long the person was working for and the rate of unemployment where the person lives. So it's going to be different than, here in Ontario for all of you, because you're based in Nova Scotia. So it'll depend on what the rate is in Nova Scotia for you. But typically, those are the factors on how to be eligible and how to know if what benefit may be best for you. So in general, amount of benefits. So let's say someone's applying for, regular benefits, a low-waged worker again. That may mean that you may be eligible for 55% of your average insurable weekly earnings. So usually in 2019, it was about $562 per week. I had a few weeks ago someone apply, and they were basically getting about $575. So it really depends again on that rate, but typically 55% of your average insurable weekly earnings. Again, for the other benefits, it will depend on what, the provincial guidelines are for that province, but typically 55% is what we see for insurable earnings. So again, it's so important to understand that the employment insurance program is really tied to your status. So, you have to first of all, you must be in Canada for it to apply. Open work permits are eligible. So if you're not tied, let's say like a seasonal agricultural worker may be not eligible because they're tied to a specific farm, and then their work permit expires, they're going back to their home country. And that's where it's very difficult for seasonal agricultural workers to apply for this type of benefit. Closed work permits, you may be eligible if you can establish that you will reasonably expect or will qualify for a new work permit if a new job is found. If let's say the application for a new work permit is denied, you may no longer be eligible. So it really ties back again to your status and why, what type of status you have. I've had some instances where someone had an expired work permit, but because they could show that they had applied for that extension before the expiration, they were actually eligible for employment insurance. But very often, it may very well be a denial if you have a closed work permit or you're part of the seasonal agricultural worker program, because you'll be required to basically go back home and you're tied to that specific employer. So it won't be possible for you to apply. Immigration status, I'll briefly mention this in terms of maternity and parental benefits. So this may be for caregivers or low-wage workers that are working here in Canada. So in this case, you don't need to prove availability to work because you're caring for your newborn. If living outside of Canada, for example, you still have to have a valid social insurance number. Most migrant workers' SIN cards expires with their work permit. So that's why we keep saying that it's tied to the status. It's so important. But let's say you're a caregiver, you're here, and you have a valid social insurance number, you may be eligible for parental benefits. Again, if you're living in Canada, they say that you must have authorization to remain in Canada. So it's going to be tied to that type of permit, what type of permit you have, whether you're eligible to remain here, whether you are, let's say on an open work permit. Those are the types of criteria they'll be looking for. Care benefits is another big one. So again, for caregivers or low-wage workers, you do not need to prove availability to work because you're caring for your family with this type of benefit. So if you're living outside Canada, you must have a social insurance number. Again, if it expires, you may not be eligible. And most migrant workers, when they leave, their SIN cards can sometimes expire. If you're living in Canada, basically it takes the position that you have authorization to remain in Canada. So it's very similar to the parental benefits and may only apply to caregivers or low-wage workers that are not part of the seasonal agricultural worker program. Again, with the sickness benefits, which is the most popular one that I see, is, again, the illness has to be temporary. So let's say you're unable to work because you've had the flu. It's, the flu is going to be going on for, let's say, a week or two. You have no income from anywhere else. You may be able to apply for this, and you do not need to prove the availability to work because you're not going to be able to work, and you must be in Canada. So even seasonal agricultural workers, let's say they're on their farm, they're not, unwell, they can't work, they have no income, they know that, it's a temporary illness, it's not permanent, they may be eligible for this. And again, it's a maximum of 15 weeks of entitlement for sick leave or sick benefits through employment insurance. So common problems for temporary foreign workers are basically with employment insurance, unfortunately, is not being considered capable and available for work. And we see that with the seasonal agricultural worker program where, you're sent home and you're not able to look for work. So that's one of the issues that we have. Lack of contributions to the EI program. So let's say you're a worker that is being paid cash or under the table. You may not be contributing to employment insurance. Errors by EI, and this happens very often. So let's say you're calling a the Service Canada office, and you get a representative. They may be assuming that you're a migrant worker, so you don't qualify for that type of benefit. So very important to make sure that you are communicating that you are paying into it and it's on your pay stub. Unauthorized work treated as uninsurable employment. So let's say, you're a worker, but you're not contributing, but you're doing side contract work and not paying into EI, you may not be eligible. Not enough hours to qualify because the employer never counted your overtime hours. And this is why I always tell workers to make sure that their pay stubs are, accurate. And that's where, have someone review your pay stubs to make sure you're getting paid correctly. Late applications, again, if you apply too late, you may not be eligible. It's very important that you ask for things in writing from Service Canada, especially if you're denied a claim, because there may be appeal options. So if you are in fact entitled to it, you may be able to, and they deny you, you may be able to appeal, but their deadlines are quite strict, and they usually say 30 days to apply for something that we call a reconsideration. So very important, if you are denied, you may only have a 30-day window from when they first told you. Sometimes that could mean leaving a voicemail on your phone, and that basically at that point your deadline kicks in. So very, very important to make sure that if you are denied, you find out, get some legal advice right away, because you may be able to appeal that decision depending on the reasons why you were denied. Applying for employment insurance. So applications now, as a result, especially because of the pandemic, are all made online. It takes about an hour to fill out that application form. Prior to COVID, they had computers available at Service Canada locations, but I would always check depending on which location is near you to see. There aren't any interpreters, so that's something that you may need to, reach out to a community agency to help you with in terms of translation if you need that, because Service Canada doesn't have any interpreters that they can provide. Claimants need to apply for a personal access code to use the online process, and that's sent by mail only, so you have to wait. So that's another issue and another barrier, I think. There's no option to review the application before submitting, so print each section as you go, especially if you have questions. And then if necessary, apply for a record of employment. So that's another thing that I'll talk about, but which your employer is required to give you. I always tell employees, do not wait for that record of employment to apply. So let's say you're unable to work, you can go ahead and start your EI application. You don't have to wait for that from your employer. Many people think that they should, but very often, especially for a temporary foreign worker, this can delay access to those benefits. So don't wait for it, apply, especially if you know it's which type of benefit to apply for. Get started on the process. And going back to the foreign direct deposit form, especially for this Canadian pension plan benefits, again, if you're basically working with a temporary foreign worker, or you are a temporary foreign worker, you're going to want to make sure you, at least if you're like a seasonal agricultural worker program, take this document with you to your home country when you leave, or even if you're here and you know the information, get that filled out and submit it as part of your CPP application, because this will allow you again to get your benefits back in your home countries. It requires some banking information, things like transit numbers, account numbers, and it's a form that you always want to submit with that CPP application to make sure if you don't come back, you're still getting those entitlements payments back in your home country. And as Teresa mentioned, I believe the St. Lucia is one of the places where you cannot use a foreign direct deposit form. And there may be a list of other places, but I know, for workers from Jamaica, they are getting their benefits back home. I help them fill it out, as early as the age of 58, sometimes 55, so they can start getting those benefits at 60. And that's really helpful for workers that may not be coming back every year, that have, came to Canada for a certain amount of years. I've had clients that have been coming for 30 years, and now that they've retired, they're able to get these benefits back in their home country. So it's a really important piece of the application that you want to complete, and make sure the information is accurate in terms of your bank account numbers, in terms of your, all the codes that's required in the form. Show it to your bank in your home country, get them to help you fill it out if you require, because that's going to be what's going to get you benefits back home.
I just want to add with this form that it's anything that you might receive from the Canada Revenue Agency. So one of the questions was, if you are back home, can you file your taxes from back home? Yes, you can, but you can file them from here before you, yes, you can file them from back home, and then if you send this form to the CRA, then you can get those benefits, get your return into your own bank account in your home country. And the other thing I like to tell people for the Canada Pension Plan benefits, if you know that you're going to retire, many workers in Ontario have been applying for the Canada Pension Plan retirement benefits at age 60 and continue to work. So if you continue to work, you continue to contribute, but you're getting more income in immediately. If you know you're going to apply, maybe when you're 58 or 59, you take this form back to your home country, because there are bank sections that the bank has to sign, and then bring it back with you. So when you apply for your Canada Pension Plan, it's already completed, instead of having to then go and do it afterwards. Okay, so, I didn't advance the slide. Because really everything is tied to your immigration status. Because you have status as a worker in Canada, you must file your income tax return. But many workers are concerned about whether or not they can immigrate. Essentially, the seasonal ag workers have no chance of permanent residence. There recently was a path to permanent residence. That path filled up very quickly. We haven't heard that they're going to announce anything more. But if they do, and you have worked in Canada for 10,000 hours in 3 years before the application, then you had become eligible. So it's unlikely for the workers that come just for the harvest, the August, September, October months, that they would even still qualify for that. Sometimes a low-wage worker can be eligible for permanent residence based on the compassionate and humanitarian grounds. They're very specific, and so I'm not going to touch into them. And caregivers are eligible for permanent residence after working in Canada for 2 years. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was, when you contact Service Canada, are you using your own cell phone? If you're Spanish speaking, do you have a community agency that you're using to contact? If you are, is it okay for Service Canada to leave, or the Canada Revenue Agency, sorry, I keep saying Service Canada, is it okay for them to leave you a message? If you're using your friend's phone, can they leave a message on your friend's phone? Do you have to sign an authorization form? And if you do, where can you get it? if you're on the farm, you don't have access to print documents. So these kinds of things are important regularly. So I know Shari and I used to do workshops where we would meet with workers on a Sunday afternoon, make possibly 10 workers, and go through these kinds of forms, applying for Canada Pension Plan, signing authorizations, all of these kinds of things. And do you want your friends to know what's happening? Maybe you don't. So you have to think about how much you're willing to share, and also how somebody can leave you the information. So here are two resources. So one of these, the very first one is a link. If you can contact Stacy, hopefully she has a way of providing you with this information. This is the Community Volunteer Tax Program. I am not aware that they have volunteers. It's all volunteer based. So I don't know that there will be Spanish speaking people to assist with the taxes. The only way to know that is if you contact the local people providing the program and ask them if they have a Spanish speaking assistant. And this other resource is Dalhousie Legal Services, Legal Aid Services. So in Ontario, Legal Aid funds a number, I think it's 76, of community legal centers. And so there's typically one in your region that can assist temporary foreign workers. But in Nova Scotia, I'm only aware of this Dalhousie Legal Aid Service, which is right in Halifax. They do have an email, and hopefully you can contact them by phone, and they should be able to provide you advice by phone. So I wanted to now, oh yeah, so here's a disclaimer. We're not providing you with legal advice. We have to have specifics of a case to be able to do that. And some of the information that we've shared with you tonight, we got from the Income Security Advocacy Center here in Ontario. So now we are opening it up to questions. I wanted to go back to Jumpy here on the screen first. You know, Jamaican workers could sometimes in a farm, you come on the same flight, but somebody comes through the low wage program and not the seasonal ag worker program, because sometimes the people in the center on the inside are packing boxes, doing the shipping. Those people typically are from the low wage stream. They're not the seasonal ag workers. So it's possible that that worker was getting money through that program. Every once in a while, it's possible that you're stuck here in Canada and you can't get a flight for 4 weeks, particularly during COVID, and so maybe that's why. We can't really tell you why someone else got a benefit and you didn't. But if you think you should have received it, you maybe want to contact the Dalhousie Legal Aid Service. So I'm just going to go, Stacy sent me, sent us a list of questions. So we've answered, you know, you're not required to use the liaison, and if the liaison is charging you a fee, maybe you want to contact the volunteer program. And what is the percentage of tax return you'll receive? So the tax return itself is not a percentage. What taxes are deducted is a percentage, and there is a math equation you can use to do that. But if you pay more than you ought to have paid, that's what gets returned to you. It's unlikely that you have any tax write-offs, we call them, or credits you can use to be able to get money back. You don't have, well, the soft workers, housing is provided. I mean, maybe you have the housing fee coming off of your pay stubs, but even if you do, it's unlikely that you'll get a big amount back based on that. So this is, so there is a way to know how much money should be taken from your pay stub, but if too much is taken, that's when you get the return. So if you feel like you're being deducted an excessive amount, you can request your employer to not deduct as much. The trouble then is you don't want to, in April, when you do your taxes, you don't want to then have paid too little and not get anything back. And so finding a reputable tax preparation company, you know, I'm not really aware in Nova Scotia. I mean, I can tell you there's the volunteer tax program. Surely they're reputable if they're volunteering to assist people with doing taxes. If you've already left Canada, you can still do your taxes. Who needs to do taxes? That's anyone with a work permit. So, and then the next question is, why does Nova Scotia take so much taxes and pay less? So that is true with actually, I'm going to add the next question first and then respond. How do taxes benefit farm workers? So, as you've seen, you pay, we call it taxes, but they're deductions on your paycheck. So you pay for CPP, you pay for EI, you pay income taxes. How does it benefit you? Well, when you're 60, you can apply for CPP, or tragically, at your an inability to work or at your death, you can collect Canada Pension Plan Disability, or your family can collect survivors. As far as taxes, I'm not aware that they benefit farm workers really at all. And how much taxes are taken is based on the Income Tax Act. So it's this law that says this percentage must be taken from this paycheck this often. So if someone else is working beside you, same number of hours, same rate of pay, and they have less taxes taken than you do, it's possible it's because of the time that you arrived in the year. If you both arrived on the same day, you both worked exactly the same hours, you know, not a minute less, well, an hour, not an hour less or an hour more, not a day more, these kinds of things. So that could be why you see a difference on your pay stub. And then the last question is, how do I file taxes? Well, hopefully you now know that you can reach out to a volunteer community program. If you don't have one near you, there are services that you could pay, and hopefully they're not as much as your liaison. But you do need your T4. So each year you get a T4, then you file your taxes, and hopefully you get a return, like an income tax return, an amount of money to you. If you have other questions, please feel free. We have 10 minutes left. We can go ahead and take more questions.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Teresa, there's a question that I commonly get here about why the CRA is asking about information regarding my spouse and my dependents. Like, why do I have to give that? And will that impact how much I get in terms of taxes? So I will say that that is part of most of the tax forms, is to share that information, but that should not affect how much you will get back, whether it's going to be less or more. But it is a requirement for the Canadian Revenue Agency to know, the name of your spouse and the name of your dependents. So, for example, children. So I get that question quite often, and it is part of the CRA requirements, but that will not impact how much you are going to get.
Also, that brings into, that reminds me that when you file your taxes, you file as a single person, whether you have a spouse and children or not, because that is your status in Canada. When you file your Canada pension plan documents, if you're going to receive disability or early retirement or survivors, you are married and you list your spouse. And so you're not lying. It's attached with your, like the income tax or your status in Canada. You're a single person in Canada, but you are married with a family. So that's why the difference in the forms as well.
Thanks a lot, both of you, for the presentation. That was great, very informative. And I have a question of clarification. So just to confirm, because I did have someone ask me kind of a similar question that you shared, that they kind of worked the same number of hours as other people, came at the same time, but their taxes the amount of taxes that they're being deducted is different. And the only difference that they saw is that they are a single person, they don't have a family. And the other people do have a family, but that's back in Mexico. So that should impact things, right?
It won't make, so if, you know, assuming everything is true, date of arrival, et cetera, yeah, it could just be that the farmer, because like we're used to doing our own taxes. So it may just be that the farmer on the paycheck or this one tax preparer that you saw happened to say that you have a family. But once it goes to Revenue Canada, they should notice that you've overpaid. So the person that paid more should get a greater tax return. And you know, maybe importantly, one of the things that we should say is, if you disagree with the decision about your taxes, if you think you didn't get the right amount back, so for that one, it may be easy because you may see you've paid X dollars more than this person, you should receive that many dollars. And if you don't, you can file what's called a notice of objection within 90 days. And then Revenue Canada will review it.
They're just really strict with the 90 days. So make sure you get some assistance with that. It's very important, because otherwise you may not be able to file, like they may not accept it. So I've seen that happen with many workers. They go back home and then it's too late to file. So really, really make sure that you act quickly within the 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I have a related question as well. This is from someone who would be they're a seafood processing worker. So they are in the low wage stream. And they were saying that basically them and some of their coworkers have been charged like quite a lot for taxes. Like she mentioned $1,400, which seems quite substantial. And so she was saying, you know, when they go back they do it at H&R Block. When they go to H&R Block says, call CRA. But so they're not receiving the support that they need. And also English isn't their first language. So that's a challenge. So would a notice of objection maybe be a good route in this kind of a situation?
Practically speaking, what would be the best in this situation is to find someone who can assist them to contact the CRA. So 1,000, the amount that you said, was it over what period of time?
It seems it was for a 1-year period.
So, right, and if they're in the low wage stream, they were probably here 8 months.
Yeah, no more than a year. Mm-hmm.
Like, right. So it's I I don't think it's that high. I mean, some of the workers pick up as much, as many hours as they can, and some of the low wage stream jobs have, what do you call it? Oh, but that's a provincial legislation. So in Ontario, so many of the workers are exempt from certain things like overtime pay, holiday pay, these kinds of things. I suspect that in Nova Scotia, the legislation is similar. But if workers are picking up as many hours as they can, the tax contribution goes up. So it doesn't actually seem like, it's not unheard of. It's certainly not unheard of that a worker would pay that much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks a lot.
Depends on your pay stub exactly how much you're working, right? And over time, I've seen it firsthand here in Ontario where we have workers that are, working 40 hours in addition to the regular work week. And that overtime pay means more taxes, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks a lot. And I think one thing, another thing is also a notice of assessment. I know sometimes, I do encourage people to get their notice of assessment if possible. Sometimes they have it and sometimes they don't. But talking about that process as well so that they can see the breakdown of, what it is that they, that they received.
So they can see what they pay and what they're not entitled to.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit tragic, right? Because, seasonal aid workers really, it's unfair. It's unfair. It's unfair. We're working hard to get it changed. We're still working.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And so I received a question from someone. Do non-status workers pay taxes or have to pay taxes? The person said, I definitely do it if I was allowed, just didn't fully, kind of they're not aware. So just wanted to, they have this question.
It depends what you mean by non-status. If you mean undocumented, I'm just going to avoid the question because I don't want it recorded. But if it's non-status in that you don't have, yes, everybody working in Canada has an obligation to file taxes, I guess is the easiest way to say that. Yeah. So if you are a SOP worker, no matter what stream, you have an obligation.
And I'll add to, like, if you don't pay taxes, and, let's say eventually you start paying, there may be penalties for those that have, not avoided to pay taxes. So there is a legal requirement, like Teresa said, to pay taxes here in Canada. It's a legal requirement, but I've seen, some workers that have been undocumented and then all of a sudden they're, now paying, they are now getting funds, and that may tie to tax penalties later on. So it's important to make sure that, if you are working here under a certain stream, that you have that legal requirement to pay taxes.
And one of the reasons why we included CPP and EI in our presentation is because you're taxed. It's a tax deduction is how we refer to it. And you'll be sad to learn at age 60 that you've been paying in for so many years, and the most you're going to get per month from Canada Pension Plan is $150 or $200 per month. You've been working so hard, 30 years, and this is it. It's quite a shock to workers. And so you want to be sure to file your taxes in order to even get the small amount that you're entitled to.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And maybe another question that we got was about what's the someone said, when are Canadians supposed to file taxes by, and how long does it take for them to receive the return? So this person commented, sometimes the liaison does the taxes, but they don't get the return until August or September. They said that I don't know why it takes so long. And they also asked about other benefits like GST, and is that something that migrant workers are eligible for? And they're a stop worker.
So it's April 30th in Canada. There is no penalty if you're late, if you're owed taxes. It's just the government continues to collect interest on it. If you owe taxes to the government, then there's penalties. So you want to be sure that you're going to get a return, or else get it in by April 30th. And the soft workers are not entitled to the GST rebate, just the low income workers, because it's based on similar things like the provincial benefits, like the I've lost it. Oh, hydro and housing and you know, just those kinds of things. But I do recall one of the things you asked me was about a tax treaty. People wanted to know what this meant for them. It doesn't mean anything for workers. The tax treaties really just have to do with investments in foreign lands. But what does matter is the pension treaties, the pension agreements. So that's why we wanted to make sure you also knew about the Canada pension. If you worked in your home country and Canada, you will be able to receive a little more.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And we had another question. Let's see. Okay. This question is related to quarantine. So maybe maybe I can just respond to this person directly afterwards. Not related to the taxes and deductions. And so I can we had someone else pose a question. Said, how do I go about filing my income tax return from back? So I understand that means from previous years.
Oh yeah, there was something else. So you can just go ahead and do it. Again, the thing is, if you owe money to the government, there will be a penalty, and the penalty is interest. Yeah. But it's not likely that you owe every year. So if you file for your 2018 and you owe, if you work pay in 2018, say, but then you get a return for 19, 20, and now 21. They just deduct that amount. So it's not like they're big penalties. But one of the questions was, if somebody has been scammed by someone doing their taxes, what should they do? So there's two things. So if you think someone's done them incorrectly, you can refile. It's called it's a correction, but refile for those years, and then it will be adjusted. But if you think someone has scammed you, like has taken your money, I would actually refer you to the police. So, and I see that we have a question from Omar. So Omar says, how many years do you have to work to be qualified for the pension? So this is where the agreement is important. So in Canada, it's 35 years you have to have worked. 35 years, I forget all the other, 35 years, certain number in the last 10, is that what it is?
Yeah, and if it's for example in Jamaica, you may be eligible to share some of the contributions, like from where you worked in Jamaica to here. Right. So it's important for those workers like Omar. that may be eligible to count both his time worked in Jamaica and in Canada?
So that has nothing to do with the tax treaty. That's the pension agreement. But that is international.
And this kind of what you mentioned around the ability to, it sounds like, combine work years from Jamaica and Canada for a combined pension, it sounds like. Is that also the case for, I guess, Mexican SOP workers?
Yes, that's actually the case for all of the Caribbean Commonwealth. SOP and low wage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. And this person's question, okay. This is a follow-up from the last question. They would normally file taxes for them, I think presumably the liaison, but I would like to do it myself. Say for this tax year, how would I file it for next year? So I think, yeah, maybe if we want to recap that, what are the options people have to file their taxes?
Oh, well, most definitely you can do your own and file them. The forms are available through the Canada Revenue Agency, and often the local Service Canada offices have the form. You can do it online, and or you can seek out agencies. So there are paid agencies, like, I'm not sure if it's Canada-wide, but in Ontario we have something called H&R Block. People go to H&R Block. And the thing about H&R Block too is, so if you are done work, say in November, and your farmer has your T4 ready before you go home, there's nothing that says you can't file early for 2021. If you know you're not going to have any more income, or even be in Canada between, say, November and the end of December, you can file early, or you can use this volunteer income tax program, or you can use the liaison.
But you'll need that T4. Like, without it, I have workers trying to apply, and if you don't have the T4, you won't be able to file. So it's important, and you can request the T4 from your employer if you wanted to file early. You should have that conversation to say, you want to file your taxes. Can I get my T4? And the employer may do that. But very often without it, you won't be able to apply for taxes until you get that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. And so we have, so we're kind of winding down the presentation. If anyone has any burning questions, feel free to send it on WhatsApp at 902-329-9595. I actually got another question about the quarantine as well. So maybe it would be good to clarify. The quarantine isn't a kind of a benefit in my perspective, from filing taxes. The employer is required to pay for 2 weeks, the 2 weeks that you're in the mandatory quarantine period when you arrive to Canada. So that's a total of 60 hours at your regular wage. So that's, you're there, you're here for work, and so you're not able to work when you're in quarantine. So this is a pay that you would receive during that time. And it's your employer's responsibility to pay for it, though I believe maybe the government has given support around that. But that is something that you should receive. And if you have concerns about that, you can definitely reach out to us, and we're happy to follow up on that. Just to clarify around that. We also have a comment here. An important note from Noé. He says the volunteers are only around during tax season. So that's just something to keep in mind as well.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's right.
Mm-hmm. What's like the regular tax season how would you, yeah.
Well, Revenue Canada, on March 1st each year, Revenue Canada opens up the online filing. It opens up their tax program. But April 30th is the deadline for filing. There are late people, so, generally, I would say March 1st.
And that's typically when the volunteer centers here in Ontario open up for workers. Like typically we start accepting tax documents as early as March 1st as well. So, but it may be different in Nova Scotia. So that definitely find out prior to if you're going to use one of those community agencies to help you file. Everyone is going to be different and on their own terms, depending on where you're located.
Thank you. And I have a question about the tax clinics because I kind of looked into them before, but I saw a brief description that says they're only available for like kind of straightforward tax cases. And so I was just wondering, I mean, yeah, migrant workers have T4s, like Nova Scotians, Canadians have T4s. So in that sense, it's like, yeah, it's like the same. But is there something that would differentiate migrant worker taxes from kind of other taxes in terms of someone who's preparing the taxes?
It shouldn't, unless there are provincial deductions, like, which I don't imagine there even are really in any of the, not for soft workers. There may be other provincial deductions for low wage workers, but for the soft workers, all of it, even the housing deductions are part of the federal program, so part of the soft workers program, so should be the same.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And maybe one final thing I would mention, sometimes workers have reached out to me that they're concerned because they started to see a Nova Scotia deduction on their pay, which is something new. And I've tried to find out information about it, but I cannot. It's very mysterious. So I just wanted to raise that in case you have any comments around. I know it's specific, but I guess just if you have any comments around it.
Right, because it's provincial, it's a bit difficult for us to answer, but it's probably, the information itself is probably available through the CRA website. It talks about provincial deductions.
Yeah, I would always encourage local workers, Stacey, if they're seeing any type of benefit that's being deducted, to double check with, the CRA to make sure that's an actual eligible deduction, because you don't want someone paying into something that they're not supposed to be. So double check, always if there's a benefit that you're unsure of, especially if it's a provincial benefit, just double check either the CRA website or contact them directly to find out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I did contact the CRA about it, but they have very, very, very long wait times. It was like 4 hours or even like a ridiculous amount of hours. So it was a bit tough. But,
yeah, really at the end of the day, it's just so unfair. And without agencies, no one is illegal, it would be impossible for workers to get anywhere. So, as long as no one is illegals around to be able to keep hosting presentations from people, hopefully that'll get some answer somewhere.
Yeah. I'll just add that if you're trying to get in touch with Service Canada, the EI, we're hoping that they'll have one for CRA, but the EI online request is way faster than being on the phone. So if you could just go online and fill out the EI online request form, it's just a couple of questions, and they'll call you within 2 business days. That's been more efficient for the workers that I advise here in Ontario.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. And so Shernette said the SIN is different for temporary workers, which may identify the tax difference, ?
I'm not sure what tax difference you mean. If you mean, I think this came up when we were talking about the new Nova Scotia tax.
Yeah, Shernette, if you want to clarify, feel free. because we can't see you or hear you. Okay. There you are.
Okay. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we hear you now.
Okay. I was just saying where you were asking about whether there were a difference between temporary foreign workers taxes and Canadian taxes. I was saying for temporary foreign workers, their SINs are usually different. They use different identifiers. Like for example, I know in my time, mine started with a 9, but when I became a permanent resident, it was changed. So usually they would recognize that it's a foreigner's SIN, and that would be attached to taxes.
Yes, that's still the case. It's a 9. And it changes every year. No,
It doesn't change. It expires.
no, it doesn't change.
When we renew, it's usually the same
Renew
one. And it doesn't get
Right,
changed
yeah.
until we get permanent status.
Yeah. From my knowledge, it expires every year, and then it would be a new number that would be issued. But it's
It's the same number, but it's reissued. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I experienced. Thank you.
Oh, Stacy, you're muted, I think.
Thank you. So yes, I was just saying thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know a lot of people's questions have been answered through this, and others who maybe weren't able to join can watch later. So thank you so much, and look forward to continuing to collaborate.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you so much for having us.
You too.
Good night.
Thanks.
Bye.